Hi there, Telebait here with another Legends of Runeterra deck guide. This time we're going to be taking a look at one of the decks I've built around the new landmark card, the Vaults of Helia, using Darius. And you can get some pretty hilarious moments with this deck with the ability to summon multiple Dariuses on one turn using the Heroine. I've seen some discussions around about the Vaults of Helia not being a very strong card in this meta, and although I kind of agree with that statement, I feel like that's mostly because it's a really bad card against aggro just because it's too slow, and there's a lot of aggro decks in the moment. And oddly enough, the reason I think aggro decks are so popular at the moment is because of two cards which aren't actually aggro cards, which are Lucian and Trundle. These two cards and the decks around them have created such strong control and combo archetypes that basically no mid-range strategy is possible. And in my opinion, a lot of the fun in card games come from these mid-range strategies where you're flexible to do a lot more different cool things. And because of these two cards, they've really suppressed the meta. And that's why the Vaults is not really a good card at the moment, in my opinion. But I'm hoping both these champions will be nerfed in the upcoming patch. I know Lee Sin's confirmed to be nerfed. If Trundle's not nerfed as well, we're going to be in for a very, very big Trundle meta. But enough about my opinions and balancing. This is a deck guide, so let's get a bit more into the deck. Before I do that, I think it's important to point out some of the mechanics behind the Vaults of Helia card. So if you have two Vaults of Helia on the board, what it does is it double upgrades one unit. It doesn't upgrade two different units, if that makes sense. So if you had a 6 mana unit, it would summon the 7 mana unit. Then right after that, it would kill the 7 mana unit and summon the 8 mana unit. If you have two units the same mana cost on the board, the way the Vaults decides which one it will kill off, it always kills the one off on the left. And when you attack with units, they all move to the right of your board. So you need to carefully plan out who you attack with to make sure the Vaults targets the right unit if you have many units of the same cost on the board. And finally, this is quite a big one. If your deck doesn't have a higher mana cost unit in it, the Vaults of Helia will not kill one of your units as it does not have a higher mana cost card to pull. So in my deck, the highest card cost I run is an 8 cost Captain Farron, and if I had Captain Farron on the board, the Vaults of Helia would just stop doing anything because it doesn't have a higher cost unit to pull from my deck. What I think would be a good change for the Vaults of Helia would be to make it start working on the next highest cost unit. So if I had Captain Farron and Darius, it would kill the Darius to summon a Rekindler out. I think doing that would make Vaults of Helia a much more competitive card. But the deck I made around it is still fairly strong anyway, and you can still definitely climb with it. But this quality of life fix would definitely make Vaults of Helia a bit more playable, and maybe you'd see it a bit more often on the ladder. So I realise it's a bit more of a longer intro than I normally do, mainly because I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on the cards. And if this is something you like seeing, let me know in the comments below, and I'll definitely include some of my personal thoughts and balance changes and cards in the future. Anyway, onto the deck. So here's the deck list I had some success with, and it definitely feels good when you get your Vaults chain going. When I was building this deck, I really wanted to find a good region for Vaults, and the best combo in my head was comboing a 6 mana champion into the Rekindler. When I looked through all the 6 mana champions, the one which kind of seemed the most interesting to me was Darius. Anivia probably seemed like the best choice, but Anivia Rekindler decks have been done to death already, and I wanted to do something a bit different. So I had my core of the deck, which was Darius, Rekindler, and Vaults, and from there I wanted to build a deck which had strong summon effects for Vaults. From Noxus and Shadow Isles, those two cards which really stood out, which were Captain Farron creating 3 Decimates in hand, and Wraithcaller who summons an extra unit. So I had my 4, 6, 7, and 8 mana unit, but I was still missing my 5 drop to create a Vaults chain. When I looked at the 5 drops, there really wasn't any good choices. And I initially tried Trifarian Shieldbreaker, and then later on moved to Neverglade Collector, mainly to help against aggro matchups. But honestly, Neverglade Collector is just the best out of a bad bunch. And if a decent 5 drop for this archetype was released, it could make this deck actually really, really strong. Because I was running Wraithcaller, I wanted to run a lot of Shadow Isles cards in the deck, and I was still missing my early game. To fill out the rest of the deck, I went with the standard Shadow Isles aggro plan, which is Ravenous Butcher, Bark Beast, Warden's Prey, Curse Keeper, Lighted Caretaker, and Callista. Again, this early game combo synergizes really well with Vaults because it has a lot of last breath effects, so if they get killed by Vaults, you get a bonus out of that as well. For more synergy with the deck, I'm running Glimpse Beyond, which just gives you that extra draw, which helps, and is another way of proccing your last breath effects. Run Unspeakable Horror, which is just a really, really good flexible card and should be run in most aggressive Shadow Isles decks, in my opinion. I'm running 1 Crumble, literally because of Tarm Soraka. There is no other reason. If you do not go against Tarm Kench Soraka, don't run this card, run another Atrocity instead. And on that note, in my deck I include 1 Atrocity just as a bit of extra reach for a win condition. And finally, I include Heroine, and this is a great win condition in this deck. You usually end up with a lot of dead Dariuses, either from trading them in, them dying to Vaults, but usually I'd say most games I end up with 2 or 3 dead Dariuses. You can summon them all back with Heroine, and if your Darius is a level, this pretty much guarantees the win against most decks. For the game plan with this deck, you need to consider it more of a mid-range deck than an aggro deck. If you commit too much to being aggressive early, often you can fall behind because you're not getting any value from your vaults. And if you want to go for that aggressive game plan, you're probably better off playing a different deck like a They Who Endure deck. But the aim of this deck is to use the Shadow Isles aggro cards to get in some chip damage, ideally enough to get your opponent below 10 health so that way you level up your Darius. And then typically you want to try and get your vaults down turn 5, and then turn 6 play Darius, attacking with Darius with Overwhelm, chips your opponent down even further. Then you get a Rekindler next turn to bring back another Darius. And then when it switches back to your attacking turn, again, you get a Farron. And then you've got your Farron with Darius, you're attacking with both of them, and if that's not enough to kill them, you finish them off with the Decimates in hand that Farron gave you. Because with this deck, you need to get your attacks when you play your Darius, and when your Darius and Farron come onto the board, it's really important to plan out in advance when you play your Vault and what units you'll be getting, so you can make sure you have the right units on your attacking turns. The other thing I also want to mention is that Vaults can be a very difficult card to play into the aggro matchup. And typically, if everyone gets an aggressive deck, you probably don't want to play Vaults at all, just because a 5 mana do nothing on the turn it's played is really too slow against an aggro deck. So going into the Mulligan, the cards you always keep are Warden Spray, Curse Keeper, Callista and Bark Beast. Then the more situational cards you keep are Blighted Caretaker and Ravenous Butcher. If you already have a Curse Keeper or a Warden Spray in your hand, you really only want to be keeping these cards if they have a good target to play them onto, otherwise they can brick out your hand too much early on. Sometimes I also keep Unspeakable Horror. This is mainly against Bilgewater decks where they use kegs, so you have a good way to remove their kegs. That way they can't clear your aggressive board early on. And finally, against control decks, I'll also keep Vaults of Helia. That way you can just play it on curve and start getting value out of it as soon as possible. Before we get into the game reviews, one thing that's important to note is I'm running a slightly different version, as when I initially made this deck, I forgot Neverglade Collector was a card, and I was running Trifarian Shieldbreaker instead. The deck still worked quite well, so if you try out this deck for yourself and you're not a big fan of Neverglade Collector, I do recommend trying Trifarian Shieldbreaker instead. But I just wanted to put this out here before you go into the game reviews and go, wait, this is a different deck to the one that was in the deck list earlier in the video. Something fishy is going on here. So that's why the deck's different. The one I've given you in the deck list, I think, is the better version. So going into this first game review, we're against a deck I've never seen before actually. A Lucian Shadow Isles deck. So I'm guessing it's probably using Vaults of Helia as well, and using Rally and summon effects like Tiana Crown Guard. I think that's what she's called. But no, it's quite an interesting deck. It's nice to go against something different, because at the moment the meta is really, really stale. So going into our hand, what we want is the typical early Callista aggro setup. So I'll probably throw away Wraithcaller and Vaults of Helia, keep the Warden's Prey as it's a good target for things like Butcher and Caretaker, and obviously keep the Callista. So I actually keep them all. That's interesting. It pays off, we get the Curse Keeper. If we get a Caretaker now, our hand's really, really strong. We just play your units on curve at the start with this deck. Nothing too much to think about really. The only decisions you really make early on in this deck are considering when you play your stuff which kills other units to level up Callista, or do you play it before you play your Callista? But in this current hand, that's not really a decision here. He plays Lucian. The only play we've got is to play Curse Keeper, so we just do that. There's no benefit in holding up 2 mana. He's not afraid of anything we could have for 2 mana. When he attacks in, there's a consideration to block, but it would block only 3 damage, and we could probably get that amount of value from blocking anyway. And if we block when we have Callista on board, it progresses to a level up. So it makes more sense to save the unit to block another turn if possible. It's hard to say how aggressive his deck is. It could be a very, very aggressive deck. So here, I'm happy to attack in with everything. I don't think Callista isn't that important to our deck, and I think Lucian might be more important to his. He does hold up 4 mana, and if he used something like Riposte, that would be really bad, but I don't know what he's really running, and I don't think you'd be running Riposte. Like, Riposte is more of a card you use with Fiora decks, or maybe even Scouts, and even in Scouts it's only a one-of. Whatever he's running, I really doubt he runs a Riposte. So he has Miscall here, which is interesting. I genuinely don't know what I'm up against. And this is kind of like the strength of off-meta decks. Like, you just don't know what to predict. So that was a really good turn for him. Turn 4, we just play our Wraithcaller. There's no reason to do anything different. I do think this is a Vaults of Helia deck, though.
Here we go.
So he attacks in with the 3-1. This is a great block for a 1-1 here. I feel like he's the more aggressive deck, so I'm happy to trade in my units here. Like, he attacks him with the 3-4, I think we just trade in our 4-3.
Purity and peace.
We let the Lucian's attack go through because we don't get any good value from blocking there. Turn 5, we're probably just going to chuck down Vaults of Helia here. It is a bit risky because it's a very slow card, and this is the hard thing about using the card. It does nothing the turn it's played, and even then it takes a while to get back its value. Because we're planning to play Vaults this turn, we open attack because giving him a chance to develop will just make our attack worse. So we always attack with 2-2 here, and he's not going to block it with his Lucian. Something important to note is I don't attack with the 1-1. And this is because I want the Vaults of Helia to kill the 1-1. And the way Vaults work is if you have 2 units which cost the same amount of mana, which we have here, both cost 2 mana, the Vaults of Helia will prioritize the unit on the left first. So this is good. Like, once you get your Vaults down, and if you're not in too bad a position once you get it down, you feel really good. Like, this is where the deck pops off, but the hardest part is getting your Vaults down without losing your game on the spot, basically. At this point, our health's getting really low, so I just want to start blocking some units. So the big decision I have to make here is whether to play Darius or Wraithcaller. Darius is good because it starts off the higher end of your train, but if I play Darius this turn, what I end up with next turn is 1 Darius and 1 Rekindler. If I play Wraithcaller this turn, next turn I'll end up with a Trifarian Shieldbreaker, a Mist Wraith, and the ability to play Darius from my hand as well, which overall is a stronger board because I have a Trifarian Shieldbreaker on the board instead of a Rekindler. And he plays his Vaults of Helia, so we're right about that. Vaults of Helia with Lucian is actually a really, really nice combo here. Like, it allows you to get a rally every single turn from his effect. The only downside to playing Darius here is if he runs Ruination. And I have had a lot of cases in the past where people just randomly throw in Ruination in their deck, even though it makes no sense. But in his deck is so board reliant, there's no way he can run Ruination, surely. So he plays Rekindler, which gets him another Lucian. Not as good as my Rekindler's going to be, though. So for our attack in here, there's a big decision of do we attack him with Darius? Because if we attack him with Darius, he's always going to block it with his Cyphria. But even if he does block the Darius, our Trifarian Shieldbreaker will live, which will pull another Darius next turn anyway. And if Darius lives, he will die to get Rekindler to get Darius back anyway. So whether Darius lives or Trifarian Shieldbreaker lives, it really doesn't make a big difference here. And because with his board he can only actually kill one of them, he could use a single combat to then kill the Trifarian Shieldbreaker, but then he's using a lot of resources and will have to lose most his board or either take a lot of damage here. So I'm pretty confident attacking him with everything is the best play here.
Go ahead, scare me.
He can block in such a way to level up his Lucian, which is a bit annoying, but at this point, if he wants to level up his Lucian, there's nothing we can do to avoid it. The way I see winning this game at the moment is using a big Heroine, and this is why Heroine's such a key card in this deck. If we can get a lot of Dariuses dead, then we can use Heroine to summon back 3, maybe even 4 of them. So he blocks in with everything, prevents the Darius level up. This is kind of the expected block. He blocks in such a way to level up his Lucian as well. Because he blocks with it, we can then use Unspeakable Horror next turn to kill it, which is great. And our Trifarian Shieldbreaker will go into a Darius next turn. Darius will die to pull out a Rekindler and another Darius. So we would have 2 dead Dariuses and 1 Darius on the board, which is a great position for us. Oh yeah, I forgot I actually forgot that it pulls the Lucian. That's really bad for him, actually, losing his Lucian there. Like, it's really hard with Vaults of Helia to always plan, like, if this unit lives, then I need to consider this. Like, there's a lot of thinking in advance with this card. And now the missed calls make sense. Maybe it's something I should include in my deck. I don't really think there's the space for it, though. So here with our board, we could play another Vaults of Helia, but I think that's kind of overkill. We just play the Callista. So here, I don't block the Undying. There's just no reason to worry about the 2 extra damage and take any damage on Darius. It puts him in range of things, like he could use a single combat to kill him, or even maybe a concerted strike. Whereas if we don't block and he uses concerted strike, we've got the double unspeakable horror to kill the Undying. It's just better not to block, because then Darius has absolutely no risk of dying, unless he's got Vengeance, which I feel is very unlikely with his deck, but you never know. There is a decent consideration to play the second Vaults of Helia here, actually, and it might be the better play, because if we play the second Vaults, Darius will double upgrade, which will mean we'll get a Darius back, and then we'll get a Captain Farron off the top as well. So I am a big fan of double Vaults here. So he's played the third Mystical here, which I think is okay. What am I doing? What am I doing? Why am I playing Unspeakable Horror? I don't know, I think I was just hoping for a good Nightfall card. But the best play here is definitely to play the other Vaults. Yeah, because he rallies here and we still have no, like, we're not a threat of dying. We just sack in the Callista, we block the 2-2 with Darius, and we still live.
Burn away the shadows.
Your death has been ordained.
Yeah, at this point I'm okay using the Unspeakable Horror on Nexus, just to get a bit more health. Also, it does level up the Darius, which is a big deal. I just prefer this position so much if we played the double Vaults though. I think that was a big misplay. All in all, I don't think it matters because we just harrow in here and we will win.
Return to us. A faith. A sentinel's work is never done.
So at this point, I can't think of anything he has which will beat us. He doesn't run Ruination, so I'm pretty sure this is guaranteed win. So we just sack in all our units which don't have Overwhelm, and don't trade in any of the Ephemeral Dariuses because we don't want them to die without doing any damage, and then attack with all 3 of them. That should be GG.
No one will remember you. Noxus will rise.
And he does surrender. This game kind of shows you the more fun side of the deck, where you use the Vaults of Helia and start getting a chain going. I really wish I did play that second Vaults there, because then you can see the Captain Farron. What I find with this deck is if you can get Captain Farron out on Vaults of Helia, usually you win the game. In this next game, I really wanted to show you the aggressive side of this deck. And it's not really a new concept, you often see this in They Who Endure decks, if you played or seen any of them before. But basically, this deck can ramp up a lot of damage really early on in the game, if you draw well. I don't want to mislead you, it doesn't happen every game, but it's basically, I'd say, 1 in every 4, 1 in every 5 games, your opponent just doesn't stand a chance because you have this crazy opener. So first 2 rounds we just play on curve, get in the chip damage where we can. Turn 3 is where we really need to make our important decision.
getting flawless.
I believe the best play is to play Callista and then use Ravenous Butcher on the Cursed Keeper. And I was close to using the Cursed Keeper first there, but thank God I did see it. At 6 mana, I don't think there's anything we're really afraid of, and we could always just choose not to attack with the Callista if he plays a big unit. But it's important to play the Callista first, that way we get 1 tick on our level up. So here we just attack with everything but Callista. And yeah, he has to trade in the 3-2. He should trade it into the 4-3 every time. Like, he does that to keep his goat alive, but he took 3 extra damage for that. It just doesn't seem worth it. Like, it's not a great use of Hush. He effectively used a Hush to play a 3-1. 2 mana 3-1 is what he did. So here we don't have any good plays. We're just going to pass. Let him do what he can for his mana and then get onto our attack again and then attack using Blighted Caretaker.
Do not fear the shrouded path.
He plays a Zed here, and interestingly, I think it's worthwhile blocking into the Zed. One reason is it gives a good target for Callista to revive when she levels up. And the second reason is to stop Zed leveling, and that way the saplings we summon next round from Blighted Caretaker will still be able to kill Zed. Interestingly, I trade in the 3-2. I think it's better to trade in the 4-3. I guess it doesn't really matter because we're going to be using the Caretaker on the 4-3 next turn anyway. Another Callista here is actually great, gives us some removal to deal with some of his threats.
There you are.
So now we're in a really good position here. Like, we can just pull in his Zed and his Goat. Attack in. This is a bunch more damage again. And we've got an Atrocity in hand. Atrocity isn't that great against Lee Sin decks though because of Deny. He uses Zed's Shadow Shift on his Zed, and this play actually makes absolutely no sense. Because effectively what he's done is he spent 3 mana to do nothing. Because he's spent 3 mana, he's got rid of a Zed in his hand to put another Zed in his hand. Like, he's literally done a 3 mana do nothing. I don't know what that was supposed to achieve. What he really needs here is a Lee Sin to kill the Callista, and then we can just play Darius and swing in with Darius next turn, and even if he spends too much mana, we can just Atrocity. So at this point we're just waiting out for his Deny mana. If he drops below 4 mana, then we'll Atrocity.
Conflict is all in the mind. My lands need me.
Does he play around it though? No, he doesn't. Okay, this is a definite Atrocity.
I'll see this through. Enter your spirit.
Wait, what am I doing? Why did I not Atrocity? I mean, I guess I tunneled too hard on using the crumble to kill Lee Sin. I should have just Atrocity'd. Got another Callista in hand though. Oh, that was a big misplay. So that's the second win with a big misplay in it. But that shows you the strength of the deck, really, that I'm still picking up wins even while playing poorly. And using what a lot of people think is a very underpowered card. And I do have to agree with that, but it's not unplayable bad. You can still play it, still have some success, and have a lot of fun. So that's it all for the video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the deck or the video, please leave a like. I upload a video every Wednesday, and next week I'll be taking a look at another landmark, the Nox Crea Arena. So subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Until next time, thanks for watching, and have a good day.